what is the message I want someone to walk away from watching a James Rath YouTube video? Ultimately, what it was like, I wanted them to see different. I wanted them to see something that they probably hadn't seen on YouTube before, or online, or just like in general. And I wanted them to see blindness in a different way, or see the life experience of someone with a disability differently.
James, welcome to the See-Through podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you. I've been following your work for a long time, and I have a lot to talk with you about. So I don't want to waste any time. How about we just jump right in? Can you introduce yourself to people who are new, or maybe just want to get to know you a little bit more?
Sure. So my name is James Rath. I'm a content creator first and foremost, but that has spread my wings a little bit to other areas. I grew up doing filmmaking, love storytelling, and that was always the most important thing to me. And growing up with YouTube since I was like 9 years old, I've been able to find different formats and different things and open up about my blindness that I was born with. And we can definitely talk more about that as we go along. But it helped me find community and helped me learn more about my community, those with similar conditions and those who have different conditions. I learned a lot more about how to be a more just empathetic person towards other people's, life situations. And opportunities kind of came when making different types of videos about technology and my personal life and then travel. And nowadays I am remaining a content creator, but also a TV show host. Now I'm also award-winning commercial director. But one area you can definitely find me is video games, which I did not expect to be working in. And that's as a video game accessibility consultant and helping to make the games that I missed out on as a kid, games that I couldn't play, the newest versions of those accessible for people with visual impairments. And hopefully what that means is preserving the playability of these games because people get nostalgic. And what I want to do is, possibly play Spider-Man 2 20, 30 years from now. But now I know that even if I get another disability added to my attributes, 10 years from now, that game's going to still work for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, you wear a lot of different hats, and I want to commend you on that.
Thank you.
And you were born legally blind and with ocular albinism. Is that how you pronounce that?
Albinism, yeah.
Can you walk me through like being born legally blinded and how did you get into video production? Because I think that's how most people know you. They know you as like a legally blind, filmmaker, content creator. And then we'll dive into those other hats you wear, later on.
Sure. Yeah. So, just being visually impaired, growing up, at least, I don't know what I'm missing out on. That's the thing is like, all I know is I'm the one friend who sat closer to the TV, who, was probably blocking the view when we're, playing the Nintendo 64 back in the late 90s. And I had a, Game Boy at the time with a big magnifying glass with a light that, could increase the screen size at school, whereas no one else seemed to really need that. So I knew like I saw things a little different, but didn't quite know to what extent. And that's partially because I wasn't like offered a white cane or Braille because my parents wanted me to kind of go through school mainstream. And part of the reason is I actually have an older brother who's vision impaired. And he has the same conditions, yet not as his vision is a little bit better, as you would, an ophthalmologist would say, being able to read maybe another line on the chart. And so his acuity was a little bit better than mine. We're talking probably when we were born, I was 20 over 200 and 20 over 300 in my worst eye. And he was about 20 over 150 or 20 over 100. Okay. Pretty much meaning he still couldn't drive, but he wasn't classified legally blind, whereas both my eyes qualified me to be legally blind to government standards, qualifying you for certain, benefits or putting you in this sort of bracket where you get a little bit more services or your blindness is a little bit more severe is what they would, that's up for debate. But, because we all see things a little bit differently. To my vision's definitely different filters from yours and anyone else. And so it impacts us differently. So growing up, I started to realize when I picked up my parents were always filming us, right? Like holiday times. They weren't like filmmakers or anything. They just like to capture the memories. But my dad had this family friend. He grew up doing Super 8 films in the neighborhood with back in the 70s with these two guys that were, you know, right next door. And, you know, they were the kind of family friends where in American culture, you tend to say like, you know, that's my Uncle Jody, that's my Uncle John, because they were just so close to your family, being your, you know, parents' best friends. So Uncle Jody comes back and visits us when he's got some holiday time. Turns out this guy's making movies with his brother, Uncle John, in Hollywood. And he had just finished up Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi film, and he did editing and visual effects for it. Wow. And that's when it kind of clicked to me, like, oh, you know, I'm like 5 or 6 at the time, but like it clicks. There are people making this film. There are people like who are like, you know, it's not just Spider-Man's not real, but like, you know, I'm sorry to break some hearts of kids, maybe. Yeah. Process, but like now I understand there's a process to this. And it, you know, it starts with like the camera that my parents are always like filming me and my brother with as we're growing up. So one day when like I wasn't supposed to, I was in the basement and I came across my mom's camcorder, maybe my mom or dad's, either or. I turn it on and I you know, I'm greeted with like, you know, a black and white image, but it was like, because that's just sort of what the preview was. But you could zoom in and then suddenly like I saw like a blob of blur and then it would go into focus, but it was on the screen that was right here up to my eye. So I'm nearsighted, right? Yeah. I'm still legally blind and there isn't much, you know, compared to an average person vision right here close up, but there's enough where a little bit more detail comes into focus. But then I see that this camera's picking up detail that I never even knew was there across the room. Like, you know, textures within the ceiling tile, within the wood, like things that I didn't know, you know, made up the world around me. And that's when I got a little fascinated. But then I realized like I can record and I can play it back and I can look at this again and keep examining this image. So I'm 8 years old. I'm just kind of realizing like the potential of a camera and beyond being a magnifier, but also a storytelling tool. And next thing I know, like later that week, I get my friends in the neighborhood together and we're making little movies, just like my dad did when, you know, he was younger with his friends. So that's how it kind of started. And then, you know, my one uncle, actual uncle, my Uncle Chris, showed me YouTube. He was very more forward thinking with the internet. So he had like a website back in like 2003, 2004, 2005. I didn't know how to do all that. So he taught me and he showed me youtube.com, which 2006, 2005 timeframe. But I created a channel in October 19th. So it just turned 17 years old of 2006. And channel's still up today.
Yeah, you're one of the OG YouTubers, you know?
Yep, in one way or another.
Yeah, and I love hearing that discovery. And I think what's even more fascinating about that is where it led you. You started this YouTube channel. You have all this lifestyle content and you have all these videos that are kind of related to you kind of explaining and advocating for, you know, the blind community, the disability community. And by the way, if you're listening, you know, I have a link to James's YouTube channel in the show description. So definitely check that out and give him and subscribe to his channel and all that if you're not already. But yeah, your content on YouTube, how much did that prepare you to do your more professional work later on in your career? Like without that, like time you spent, you know, learning cameras, editing, posting, you know, creating a title for the video, a thumbnail. How has that work you did as a kid, you know, just kind of picking up the camera, getting involved with YouTube, how did that get you to where you are now, where you're directing, you know, ads for Tommy Hilfiger? You have a travel show called Blind Spots that I want to talk to you about. But yeah, it seems like video production has taken you very far in your life, and I'm just curious about how much your YouTube journey has kind of helped you in that professional world.
I owe everything to it. it was my hands-on experience of my college in a way. I never went to film school, and I thought about it. I almost did, but I realized at the time it was like what I was doing here. This is my own stuff. I'm learning their tutorials here. It was just more of a valuable experience, and the education system itself wasn't the most accessible for me growing up. I make note of that in like some of my intro videos. I'm like, I had a 1.8 GPA. Oh well, that's life. I'm a creative, not a academic, and I own that. So so that's just me. And I was posting, back when I was 8 years old, I was posting silly little like, things. A lot of those are gone now, just because like, I don't know, self-consciousness or whatever it might have been. Like growing up, I'm like, I'm gonna delete this. Some of them are private. Some of them may still be private today, but I kind of went in like, when I got a talent manager and he had access to my channel, like analytics and stuff, I'm like, I want to delete these because I don't know, I'm still embarrassed and I don't know this guy like on a personal level yet. So, I deleted some older archive videos. I saved them all, so they're all like on a hard drive. But regardless, definitely like there's a history there, and it's kind of cool at my channel. And I think I reshared some of those videos in a way with like retrospective video I made like 14 years on YouTube, or 15 years or whatever it was. And so I was just posting short films. I was posting little stunt videos with my friends in the neighborhood, and I was learning how to like title from like other YouTubers I watched at the time, which were like Smosh, iJustine, Nika Higa. Those were like the video content creators I watched growing up until like, got a little bit older, and some of them moved on, some happened. And it's kind of cool to see like how YouTube has become more of a business than, a hobby. And it can be both, and it can also be one or the other, depending, where you're coming from, what you're looking at, doing with it. So I started, pretty much producing all my own stuff, and still to this day pretty much do. It's very rarely I get anyone else like in, which sometimes it's to help with an edit or something, but I'm typically seeing the project from writing all the way to post-production to editing. And having that experience with all those hats, I think really helps to play with understanding as a director when you're working on a bigger production with like more people.
Yeah.
I was still kind of like there as a director to sit in through when we had to do things like storyboarding, wardrobing, with the Tommy Hilfiger shoot, going to the post-production. I wasn't editing it, but I sat there with the editor to like, let's try a few different, to find the voice of the film that we made. And even doing this most recent project, this TV series for Curiosity Stream Blind Spots, it was a small production. There was a few of us. I worked with a production company to do it, to kind of like help with more of like the people who already had that foundation, brought them on, but it was still like a small budget project in a way. We had to produce 10 episodes with, I don't know if I can share how much of the budget there was. Maybe one day I can, I don't, but I'll wait until I have that clearance. But it was small. It wasn't anything to like gloat about. So we squeezed it, for everything we could. And I even edited an entire episode of the show. So that's how much of like my hands-on I had. Was I was directing, I was writing, co-writing a lot of the episodes, but then I edited one all the way through, until I was time to hand it off to mixing and color. So yeah, that's it. Really has prepared me a lot. It was my film school, and I owe everything to that channel, and still do, and I still plan to go fully in on it in this coming year.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I just wanted to pick your brain on that, because I find that there's like, it's almost like film school is almost part of like, it's the legacy media version of learning, kind of.
Yeah.
Because I went to a film school, and I ended up like, I work as a video editor, like that's my career. But funny enough, I didn't take one video editing class. Like I took all the other classes, because I was like, oh, I already know how to edit. I don't need to take a class. and then I ended up editing anyways. But I noticed like there's like a different mentality with filmmaker, like with people with film school backgrounds who have like that kind of filmmaker mentality. There's almost like this kind of almost like unspoken beef between like the film world and the YouTuber world. And I don't think it has to be that way, because I think, you know, there's more in common than you think. Like you said, you learned a lot of very valuable skills and there's crossovers. And the bottom line is like YouTube is a much better outlet and format to get your work seen by more people than like, let's say, the film festival circuit. And I think that's a hard pill for a lot of, you know, people in the film industry to kind of swallow, that YouTube's kind of changing the environment, the landscape, and where should you put so much in, should you invest so much into film festival submissions, or should you just put your product up? And I kind of love learning and hearing from both sides, because I kind of have my toes in both, you know?
Yeah. I think something that's interesting with YouTube is people are looking for real stories typically on YouTube.
Yeah.
So if you're creating like short films that are scripted, there's still a place for you on YouTube. And sure, you got to do a little bit more work on your part, but something you can easily monetize or do is show the process. You know, make your own behind the scenes story documentary about the film that you're creating.
Yeah.
But show it through a first person lens where you're talking to the audience of like, hey, here's my senior thesis, and here's how we created it from like conception to finalizing it, and bring it to theater, to like film festivals, and having my film on a theater, and like show that process, because people love that, you know. Market it like YouTube. So do your research, learn how to do chapters, titles, SEO, create a great thumbnail. But like, if you can tell a really good story that can grab someone's attention in the first 20, 30 seconds, I think filmmakers can utilize YouTube as a great marketing tool for their other stuff, to get people off the platform to go watch their thing.
Definitely. Yeah. I think people are like maybe sleeping on the benefits of YouTube. And now that I've kind of gone all in on YouTube at this point, so I'm like, I feel like I've almost jumped ship. But I kind of value my background. I think it kind of translates even in podcasting. You know, I made some documentaries in the past. So like when I'm doing interviews, it's almost like nice, because I can treat my podcast episodes almost as like mini documentaries. And I find this to be something interesting I want to pick your brain on. I feel like I can spread a message that's more succinct and just like covers more ground with just an hour of talking to someone like you, let's say, versus like spending years on a feature film to share the same message. It's like almost like in an hour conversation, I can cover the same message that like, and I know feature film is going to be more impactful with like visuals and music and a performance and a storyline, but there's something powerful about being able to put out more content and just have podcast conversations where you're going deep on like more emotional topics, you know, like blindness and the disability community. You know, instead of trying to solve the world with a film, it's like I'm trying to solve the world with like hundreds of episodes, you know. I don't know. It's just, there's just different ways to approach things, and YouTube kind of has all of the options.
Yeah. And
so yeah, I wanted to ask you, because you have a background, your background on YouTube, and you have consultancy backgrounds. And I'm gonna get into that, but let's cover your travel show. Can you tell everyone about that? It's called Blind Spots.
Yeah, definitely a long time in the making. I realized when I was out in LA, you know, even just the jump from the East Coast in a suburban, you know, Philadelphia area, going out to LA was like a huge thing for me. I wasn't trained with a white cane, always had, you know, a ride, and suddenly I had to figure it all out. So I started adopting a white cane when I walked around the city, ended up taking it whenever I got opportunities to go speak or, consult or do something from like the videos doing YouTube. Creating YouTube videos opened up so many opportunities to then be able to travel to places, and people paying my way to go travel. And sure, it's to do work, but it was also like, this is incredible. This is awesome. I never got to travel this much as a kid. And so then I came up with this idea of like, I captured little moments of me traveling with like a white cane, trying to find assistance at the airport or, train station. And it's a different, song and dance than someone who's sighted, going around and, reading the timetables on like on a train board at the train station, or, finding your flight. Like, I've never looked at one of those boards before in the airport that like tells you all your flights. I just can't. It's not for me. I have to use an app or, ask for assistance or, whatever it might be. So it's a different beat. And then when you're actually in new places and environments, you're sometimes taking it in differently. The sounds, the smells, the food, it's a different perspective. And like, visually, I can see some color and some blur, but that's not what I'm taking in. When I look back and I think about like Zurich or Japan, it's my different senses that are reacting to it in my brain and from the memories. And I wanted to capitalize on that and show it in a way that, hey, no one's really done a travel show with a blind guy hosting and talking to the audience. So back in a few years back, I'd say it was 2017, maybe 2018. 2018, I got this idea and wanted to, pitch it around, and we had no bites. We got someone to like, start shopping it around. They didn't do it. They couldn't do it. And I don't know, it's a fault on them. I wasn't in most of those meetings. I don't know what the pitch really looked like, how it was being pitched or sold. I'm not gonna like fault them, but they just couldn't sell the idea to networks.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until the pandemic, I decided to leave LA. I'm like, the cost of living here versus all the Hollywood opportunities just kind of dried up in April of that year. So I was just like, all right, maybe go back to the East Coast and kick it back. And, I got my rep out here. If something calls for me to be out here, great. And things did. I went out there for consulting or for different kinds of projects. But Curiosity Stream, which is a pretty interesting platform, it's from the original executives of Discovery Channel.
Okay.
They walked away from Discovery, from my knowledge, when like things started getting more reality TV based, and they wanted to find content again that was like documentary, nonfiction. So Curiosity being think of it as like the niche streaming platform, the Netflix for nonfiction, educational yet documentary, like exciting content. So you can find everything from science, tech, finance, war, whatever kind of piques your interest. But travel is one of those areas, and they were looking for some original content, and they were talking to YouTubers for some original content. I think their most successful video on YouTube was like the story of Mr. Beast, Jimmy Donaldson's like story, like of how going from a kid who had no subscribers to like, and I think he has Crohn's disease, and talking about that and like how he like kind of hid his in a way, like his I don't know if he identifies with a disability or as disabled, but either way, he has a condition that he lives with, and how that's kind of fueled, and
Yeah, I would love to talk to him.
Yeah, me too. So they did a documentary with him though, and that's the most successful on YouTube. So I think they a light bulb went off. They're like, maybe we should get more YouTube-like content. And I had some connections through my manager there, and we presented the idea of like, hey, what do you think about a blind guy traveling with on your dime and capturing that experience? And so they liked it, they loved it. And the one thing that the show took a little longer to be produced, because one, I had people from the previous shopping who couldn't get it to like bite or anything, like still holding on to that project and like nothing signed or anything, but they were just like, wanting weird Hollywood politics stuff. But it was like, I'm like, this is my story. This is like, and they want me to tell it in a way that's a YouTube video, not an Anthony Bourdain production. Because we didn't have that budget. And so I had to cut some people kind of from this like project, and it was messy and whatever. But I'm very proud of what we made, and how we made it, and like how I had to kind of fight off some Hollywood, like in a way to put it, like people who were trying to leech onto my story and project just for $1. And it hurts because it's like they weren't aligning with like what the project is. They wanted to make it as Hollywood looking as possible. When it's like, no, this is like I'm holding a vlogging camera when we go out and film, and like, yeah, there's a fly on the wall documentary crew, but I'm talking to you throughout the story. I'm talking to my viewer, because they need to like, I want to normalize like, folks talking to just a person with a disability, because there's a lot of, I think subconscious bias a little bit when, non-disabled person who's never interacted with a person with a visual impairment or blindness, it might just be afraid to like say the wrong thing or sometimes forget or overthink it and forget that we're just people, with interest. And I want to go ziplining, I want to go check out museums or taste test the, food in Japan. So that's why I wanted to bring someone like the audience along for the ride as like this first person perspective, and had a lot of fun doing it. So that was definitely, again, it's 10 episodes. It's a lot of content in there. They're 24 minutes each. And we talked to some very influential people in the disability space, as well as like the accessibility space. So many blind folks are featured on this, especially those who are like both in America based, but then also many who are international. Awesome. And we check out some very cool spots, like basically what I say is like the MIT of Europe, but ETH in Zurich, Switzerland. It's where Einstein went to school, and they're doing some really cool things with robotics and different ways of solving accessibility barriers. So just some really neat things. And then we sprinkle in the fun part of travel, like sleeping in an igloo hotel on the Alps, doing things like hiking up a monkey mountain in Japan. And then we check out some really cool things, like Microsoft invited me to their inclusive tech lab to like check out how they are, experimenting with different ideas to overcome barriers that are presented, and solving accessibility problems and equations. So a lot of stuff is packed into the show, and it's so fun. And I have so much gratitude for everyone who voluntarily like got involved with it and helped make like this the best show it could possibly be.
Yeah, I'm excited to dive deep into it, and it's out now. It premiered, I think, October 26th on Curiosity. And is that like a streaming platform for those who haven't downloaded it yet? Or do you just kind of download it?
Yeah, so they have their app, and audio descriptions are available, to my knowledge, through their native app. But if you don't intend to watch with audio descriptions, I don't know. I reached out to them to try to like, I don't know how the distribution kind of works on their end, but they're also available as like add-ons on like the Apple TV channels app. So if you have an Apple TV app, you can just kind of subscribe for like $3 through that. Same thing through Amazon Prime. If you have Prime, you can add it onto your Prime membership for like $3. And you can cancel anytime. You're not like locked into it. So if you want to check out the show, great.
Yeah, I recommend everyone check it out. Show support. A lot of effort, like you said, years of work has went into this, and it's a difficult industry to navigate when you have so many working parts and people involved, and you have a very distinct vision for how you want it to turn out, and then you have other people kind of trying to give their 2 cents, and it's up to you as the director. You got to filter out. You take in, you consider everything, but it's your decision on what you filter out and keep and change. And And I think it's a lot more stressful than people think or would like to, or people know, I think. So as someone who's made a lot of content and videos, I know how intensive 10 episodes are, especially when you're involving travel and charging batteries, and just having enough space on SD cards is enough to worry about in itself.
Oh man, well, and losing things like, it could have been SD gets formatted the incorrect way, and then like the backup footage is corrupted, and then I'm editing an interview. Next thing I know, with like missing a camera angle or missing one of the audios, and then luckily something like Adobe Podcasts with like the cleaning, audio exists, and I can make something work. It's editing was very interesting. Editing on this, because so many beats to it.
In terms of editing, what program do you use? I'm curious.
I'm a Final Cut guy. I've been a Final Cut guy since 10 came out. I know 10 got a lot of flack, like X back in the day.
Yeah.
I was graduating my editing skills around that time, so I wasn't missing out on anything. I was just getting new features because I was coming from, I'd used some Sony Vegas, but nothing too advanced in it. But I was really using iMovie for a couple of years. And then when Final Cut was coming out, I graduated to that. And all the features that people were asking for to come back from 7 and then some, I got to learn as they were being reintroduced. So I'm very appreciative of what Final Cut 10 did for me at the time. It was perfect timing for me in my filmmaking journey. So
yeah, it's funny when you were answering that question, I was very interested in what you were talking about, but then I started to think, I'm like, will my audience care at all? But yeah, I'll say it anyways. Since I'm an editor, I started with iMovie, and then in college I used Final Cut 7. I laugh at this all the time, but in college, like my first semester, we were still shooting mini DV tapes, and and now it's like college students have like red cameras, and it's crazy how different it's became.
I was doing mini DV when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I have my very first camera right over there.
Yeah, I actually have a mini DV tattoo on my forearm.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm holding it up to the camera,
Love that.
Just to kind of throw back to the time when it was much simpler time where you just kind of had fun with a camera, And then I went to Premiere and Creative Cloud, and I've just kind of stuck there. But I've used Final Cut X, and I've used some DaVinci Resolve, a couple of that. But Premiere is kind of my specialty. I actually edit my podcast in Premiere just because I'm so quick in it.
Yeah, no, same way with me with Final Cut though. It's like everyone's got their thing that they can just they know every shortcut to. DaVinci though, I just side note, love what they're doing. Available on all platforms, and it's free to start to use and just get into.
Yeah.
I wish if Apple would ever create a Windows version of Final Cut, fantastic. It'd open up the market more, but they won't, and they just won't. So DaVinci, I think, is coming in, taking that market. It's great. So professional editing is more accessible than ever for anyone to get into.
Yeah, let's talk about that. In terms of accessibility with editing, let's just talk about from when you started to now, how has accessibility evolved? Is it evolving, and where do you see it going?
Now, depending on the angle of accessibility that you're kind of asking or coming from, it's assistive technology for, things that are hard coded for people with disabilities versus just the accessibility of obtaining.
Let's say disabilities. Yeah.
I'd say both in general though. Back in the day, it's maybe rare if you've had professional software accessible for different kinds of screen readers, and I'd say that's even a lot of video editing. I think products don't think about a blind person editing with their software, or people on the spectrum of blindness.
Yeah.
I think there's been some improvement. Apple has made Final Cut very screen reader friendly. It's still a professional app, so you need
Definitely.
to kind of you need to be proficient in your screen reader and voiceover to have the best experience with Final Cut. So it's learn one first before you jump ship to the next. But then there's iMovie that can help. And there's iMovie and Final Cut now on the iPad. It's dumbed down version and not as, but if it does what you need, great.
Yes.
That's what's important. I've used iMovie on the iPhone when traveling a little bit, and there's other programs now that can do that. So it's hard to say though, like what, it depends on what you need. But I know people who like never touch a mouse or keyboard because of their motor skills or their physical disability, and they have different kinds of third-party switches or hardware to like interact with their computer. They fully edit full-length feature films on Final Cut. And I'm sure the same could be said with like other third party. Like I don't know. I don't know someone who uses Premiere and never touches a mouse or keyboard, but it might be possible. So it's just, I'm not going to be an expert in every use case there, but I will say like the accessibility of starting to video edit is bigger than ever. Sure, Windows doesn't have like Windows Movie Maker just built in, but our phones and our tablets have these app stores with vast amounts of like video editing software that's just available to like download. And some, be aware that like some might be microtransactions out the wazoo. But then there's, the ones that are subscription based, at least that, hopefully the full thing. Final Cut on iPad does that. Then there's LumaFusion, which I believe I paid one time for on on the iPad. And it's got like even more features than like Final Cut on iPad. It's really grown. So that's LumaFusion. So there's definitely a lot you can look for out there. So I think the barrier to entry is smaller than ever to get into video production.
Yeah, I agree. Even like I said, in college, I was shooting mini DV tape, and now on my phone has a better camera. No,
the 15. I shot a lot of my show, the travel show. I started with like the camera that I'm using actually right now for this podcast, the Sony ZV-E10, which is like my go-to. I love it. Yeah. But because it's accessible to just pick up and start shooting with, and that's what I'm looking for. But then I was using an iPhone 14 Pro for a lot of my travels, even a Pixel 7 Pro for like the later part. But we use both in my travel show. A lot of it is shot on iPhone. A lot of the vlogging stuff are like, from my perspective, just the phone. So the phones that you have now in your pocket, especially if you're upgrading last year or this year, you could start doing YouTube or even short films. Just learn how to use it and how to get the best picture out of it.
Yeah, 1,000%. Yeah, I think you're a great advocate for filmmaking and just video creation, and that's why I wanted to reach out and talk to you, because obviously I have a background in this as well, but I think your story is great for someone who is newly diagnosed with, let's say, a retinal eye disease, or maybe a parent who has a child who was born legally blind or blind, and they want to get into video production, or their child has an interest. And I think you're kind of a proof of concept that it's possible, and I think that's really powerful. And you've had a lot of other great opportunities. Like we talked about, you were a consultant, like you were brought on, I'll mention two brief ones, but with Apple, you worked with Tim Cook on accessibility for Apple products. You were brought on to the TV show C, and was kind of an on-set kind of, how would you describe that? You were in like an on-set kind of...
A technical advisor, I think is what was like put on my IMDb. It was uncredited, but there was meant to be more. Than the pandemic happened. That's kind of one of the opportunities that unfortunately was taken from that. But I was set to do a lot more on C for season 2. And then obviously they shoot in Canada, so it was a little hard to get like extra folks to go with them, over the border during that time. So what we did, though, at least for the first 4 episodes of C, I got to shadow Francis Lawrence, the director, brilliant guy. Also started a lot of his filmmaking career doing Hilfiger ads. We talked about that, which is cool.
Yeah.
But big fan of his work, and the world building of that show was so interesting. It was they wanted blind folks involved with it because it was like, hey, 500 years from now, what if the only last remaining people on Earth were blind and adapted to like, language and writing systems through like tactile knots in with string, and it's just so interesting. So, I love that opportunity. It was so fun to like go to Vancouver. It was cold in the winter time, but it was great to just like be on a huge set like that, because I don't know the actual amount of money that those episodes cost. It was like estimated 10 million per episode. I don't know if that was true or accurate, but
I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, very high quality production. And you got great names like Jason Momoa, Alfred Woodard, and then you have folks from the blind community who are also in it. Marilee Talkington, and so it definitely a great piece of TV to watch at some point.
Yeah, I like their model of kind of how they deal with showing blindness on screen. Like, and this is kind of like a controversial topic where it's like, do you cast someone who is visually impaired in the blindness BVI community, or or is it just acting? Can anyone do it? And I think C is kind of a nice mix of the two, where they had people like you on set kind of ensuring that blindness was being represented in a realistic manner to the actors like Jason Momoa, who are not visually impaired. But then they also casted as well. They also utilize, visually impaired actors and actresses. Do you, what's your take on all that? Do you have like what's your perspective on the whole acting and disability community and that controversy?
I'm definitely a big advocate for authentic casting. It was a big push for me to do that when I did the Hilfiger commercial. Everyone we casted, had a disability. Wanted to give opportunities back to my community. We are, especially in the blind community, like most people in the blind community, like more than half don't have full-time employment, don't have employment opportunities all the time. And a lot of that has to do with just like bias in the workplace and employers and recruiters. But a lot of it is then, for anyone in the arts, it's you want to tell these stories from these communities, but they're not always told authentically, and it causes like weird bad stereotypes. Like there's so many poorly done blind characters in the 90s and early 2000s for just like a jab in a comedy film or something. So it's like, when done tastefully, it can be great. Look, I know the blind community well. We have a great sense of humor, I feel like, at least collectively. I like to, do my fair share of blind jokes with my friends to like,
definitely. Yeah.
It's just turning my everyday experience into a good laugh, because life is, it can be dark, but like, you just gotta laugh sometimes. So for me though, it's like going back to the Blind Spots show. It was very important because it not just was it my story, but it was the people that we were, interviewing, people that I was like bringing along for the ride. It was their story. It was very important for me to have that authentic representation. And sure, that's a documentary, but that goes back to like the people who I had to like cut from the project before we went into production. They were losing sight of why I wanted to do, a first person kind of vlogumentary in a sense. It's because I wanted people to not see a blind person on like TV or screen as like a character, but like you're coming along with me on a trip, a vacation, a work trip, to meet some really cool people. And I want you to feel like you're in the room with them, with me. Yeah. And so that was very important for me. And so authentic casting and authentic representation can, come from a few different angles. With C though, going back to your exact question, I think it was okay with what they did, because when you have a plot line like what they had, which was everyone is pretty much blind, you know, for the most part, no spoilers, but like for the most part, everyone is blind in that world. Hollywood has already kind of rejected so many blind and visually impaired talent, or like discouraged. There isn't a whole lot of headcount, you know, to you know, what are you going to do? Get everyone who was blind on C and just like AI clone them, you know, for the whole show? Like, I mean, that's a whole other controversial topic right there.
Yeah.
So I think what they did was fine. And moving forward, it's like, if you're going to have an opportunity where like, what's this, 1, 2, 3, a group of like blind characters, small group, like, you know, small headcount where then try, you know, the best you can do is try to find that actor, or consultants, of course. That's very important. I think consultants are easier to obtain and find, with like sensitivity reading, or just like helping to be writers in that writing room. You know, if you're going to have a blind character or like storyline throughout the whole season of a show, just bring that person on as a writer, you know, let them be in that writing room full time, if that's going to be a core part of your season or show or movie. Joe Stretchade is a brilliant guy. He's one of the producers on C, and it started as like a smaller role, like consultant, writer, to like associate producer, and he got promoted all the way to like full-on producer because of how much work he put in. He's a totally blind guy who, one of the brightest people you could have in a room.
And what was his role again on the show?
He was a producer, so he helped, and it was great. He's totally blind, and the fact that like a show like that had a producer who was totally blind, was great. I mean, that already shows their commitment to the community, but also Joe was such a vital resource for them to reach out to the community because he's so well connected. I go to him a lot, and whenever I'm like, do you know someone who maybe is in this sector of like this industry, but they're blind? He's like, oh yeah, let me do an intro. I'm like, wow, okay, cool. So it's great. Awesome dude. You can read up on him. He's done plenty of interviews. I recommend, like, you know, if you can get him on this.
I'd love to. Yeah.
He's been involved. He's the one who trained Charlie Cox for Daredevil on Netflix, to be blind, you know, during his scenes where he's, you know, got to fit in with everyone else. And he is blind, but his senses obviously illustrate the world in his head differently. But yeah, I think authentic casting is something that I'm passionate about. I always go for, and it's a priority. But of course, depending on the context and story, you sometimes just have to tell a story and get it done. At the end of the day, and whether it's, if you can get a consultant, if you get a full-on actor who is from that community, better. But I'd say make the most effort you can.
I think it's even better, like you said, try to have either or. But I agree that the optimal solution would be to have both. Like, maybe there's not a lot of people acting with visual impairments or disabilities because they don't see it and don't really think that there's a space for it. You know,
I think something that's important is to remember, and that's a great example, but acting is a skill that you can learn, you can build. But, you know, an authentic life experience like a disability, blindness, that's something you bring to the table because that's your life experience. It's something that when you're looking at your co-stars, when you're looking at your director, you're already in character. You're already able to authentically bring that to the table. And it's a lot less work for them to research and figure out how to fake it, because we can bring that. And so I think that's important for them to know and remember.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And thanks for adding that on. I think that's perfectly said. I wanted to ask you before we wrap up here, you have a slogan, basically. It's called See Different.
Yep.
And you're wearing a shirt. And I want to give you credit for that shirt. It's if you're listening on and streaming and not watching on YouTube, but James is wearing a shirt that has like an eye logo on it, and it looks like it's in motion, but it's static. It's kind of trippy, honestly, to look at.
It's meant to represent my eye. So even though, we mentioned earlier ocular albinism, that's a lack of pigment in the eyes. It makes my retinas a little underdeveloped, but that also triggered another condition that a lot of blind folks have across multiple conditions, but it's like a secondary sub condition called nystagmus. And some people could have it alone, but nystagmus is where the eye involuntarily shakes. It could be vertical, it could be horizontal, it could be even in circular motions. For me, it's horizontal, and I wanted to represent that because the way people see me sometimes is they see me different because my eye shakes, and that is a visual trait or representation that people can notify or see within my eyes. Yeah, but it also makes me see the world different. Not everyone with nystagmus will have it completely affect their vision, but for me, everything I see is in a constant state of motion. It's shaking slightly. It looks like there's a slight vibration with everything, and it can intensify. It could lessen depending on what I'm doing or my stress. That can play a role in it, but I wanted to have that represented, and I actually had someone with nystagmus actually design that, which is great. She's a good friend of mine, so I appreciate being able to pull from the community to make this icon or logo.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, and then even on the back
it says "See Different." For those listening, James turned around and it says "See Different" on the back. What does "See Different" mean?
Yeah, so it was just a phrasing I said at a lot of, at the end of my videos a lot on YouTube. It was just I thought a lot back in 2016, 2017, 2018 about what is the message I want someone to walk away from watching a James Rath YouTube video. Mm-hmm. And ultimately what it was I wanted them to see different. I wanted them to see something that they probably hadn't seen on YouTube before, or online, or just in general. And I wanted them to see blindness in a different way, or see the life experience of someone with a disability differently, in a way that is more optimistic, more open-minded. And so ultimately at the end of my videos, I occasionally still do it depending on the type of video, but formats change every time. But I basically said was, thanks for watching. I hope you could see different today. I'll hear you next time. And so ultimately I wanted to rewrap that or repackage that message back into, some merch that I, worked with some people I could commission to make this, and pretty much anything I make from the merch, it goes back into videos or projects that will help me hire other folks who are blind or visually impaired, or be able to get back to them in some way. So it's just been a little side project of mine that I always sort of gave screen time in my videos to subconsciously. So yeah, even the hat was it's my usual sunglasses, which I think are just in my bag over there, which I usually have in a lot of my videos, depending on how much light. It's early morning, so I'm able to take in a little bit of light, so these blue glasses are fine. But normally I have my prescription kind of yellow tinted glasses, dark yellow on. So I made kind of smiling eyes without even a smile.
Yeah, those are awesome, man.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'll include, if people are interested in checking out your merch and all your other information, like your website, your Instagram, your YouTube channel. I'll have links to all of that in the episode or video description, wherever you're taking in this podcast episode. Again, check out James's show on Curiosity. You can download the app. It's called Blind Spots. And on James's website, he has links and videos of these Tommy Hilfiger ads we talked about, many other features, him collaborating with Apple and his work. He has so many videos. It's so many. You could be lost in James's world. But yeah, before we go, I guess I wanted to give you a chance. If there's anyone out there who wants to get with a disability and they want to get into, the filmmaking YouTube world, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I mean, you got to start from somewhere. A lot of people want to start with if they want to create content, they just want it to look the best, or they're so focused on what equipment they need, or just use what you got, or what you can grab, and that's just your phone and some lighting from a window, prompt it up and just tell your story. That's what's most important is the story. And your first videos are going to be bad. Like mine were bad. Mine are bad. And like some are still up there and some are unlisted now. Maybe one day, like when I feel like I'm like more open and less conscious of like showing those, like, I will. I think the reason they're not up is because I'm like, I don't want that to be the first thing that you see, but like you got to start somewhere. And like, that's ultimately like once you start getting better and you're getting better at like talking in front of a camera or feeling comfortable, less filler words, right? And we're always going to have them, but sometimes you get the ums and uhs and whatever. There you go. So just start. You really just have to start, and don't over prep. Just prep. Shooting is the most important step. Then you can edit if you want a little bit, but sometimes people like the authenticity, but just like one take wonders up on YouTube, and it's a decent spot to just start conversation, and then you can go from there.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. The best camera you have is the one you have, and thinking about doing the thing, planning to do the thing, talking about doing the thing, that's not doing the thing. You just got to do the thing. That's what I'll add to it. But
definitely,
James, man, I appreciate you coming on the See-Through podcast, and I had a great time picking your brain. I could honestly talk to you for hours about and nerd out on all this stuff. So I appreciate you coming on, man, and I'm glad we connected. I look forward to keeping up with you in the future, man. But enjoy the rest of your day and take care.
Appreciate it. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
Bye.